Welcome into Surviving Paradise, the podcast that takes a sometimes serious, oftentimes humorous look at the claim by Jehovah's Witnesses that they are living in a modern-day spiritual paradise. I'm your host, Stacy Bauman, former elder, ministerial servant, and a kid raised as a Jehovah's Witness in the 70s and 80s. Warning, we try to have some fun here, try to heal. Each episode has sarcasm, humor, sometimes some tears. It could get real serious. Please note, nothing said here or shared is ever meant to offend. Hopefully, it triggers some brain synapses. We're hoping to get people thinking. Well, here we are. I've officially stayed away from this subject for long enough. At the time of this recording, the only website powered by Holy Spirit has a feature article titled, "What Does the Bible Say About Racism?" It looks like the time has come. We need to discuss this insanity. Aside from some of this show's greatest hits episodes, hopefully you enjoyed those, I've mostly stayed away from this organization's many, did I mention many comments on all things racism. Even more than comments is the nuanced behaviors and actions in reference to racism. But here we are, the faithful and discreet slave, as of 2012's annual meeting, is made up of 11 men in upstate New York. Yes, despite almost a century of claiming Jesus' parable, not prophecy, regarding the faithful slave, including all those that would one day live in heaven, well, Jehovah's Witnesses have been told that Jesus suddenly changed his mind and decided it was only a teeny tiny collection of men, all located in the United States of America, that would speak for him and give the rest of us food at the proper time. And yes, that includes everything they have to say about racism. Did you spot the irony? I hope you did or can. Whether you're currently a Jehovah's Witness or someone that has long left the spiritual paradise, would it surprise you to learn that this organization has a very long history commenting on racism? And it may not be what you think. In fact, if you're a Jehovah's Witness, please take a seat. If you're a Jehovah's Witness and any of this is new to you, there's a chance you may have an adverse reaction. When I saw this article featured on the front page of the website, I audibly said, "Oh no." From the outset, I want to say that it would have been wise, very wise, for these guys in New York to stay completely away from this topic. But here we are, in May of 2025, and the men Jesus trusts the most on planet Earth has decided to feature an article on racism. But there is a lot to unpack in the title of the article alone. I'm struggling to know where to begin, but see where your mind goes. Jehovah's Witnesses as an organization are commenting on racism. But the article featured on the website, the title, well, it reads, "What does the Bible say about racism?" Instantaneously from the outset, we have Jehovah's Witnesses as a faith linking itself to what the Bible has to say and show us about racism. And look, oh no, who wants to tell them? Who? These guys in New York aren't very bright. They aren't the smartest bunch up there in that secret chamber, but this is a new level of dumb. Based on their website and article title, all backed by that ancient book, the Bible, their words, not mine, go look. Join me now for a look at what Jehovah's Witnesses and the Bible say about racism. I want to issue another trigger warning for literally everyone from all walks of life, from all countries, from all corners of the earth. Some of this might trigger you. I'm sorry. I'm just sharing their wisdom. We're going to celebrate our diversity together today, even as we let the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses give us their thoughts on racism in their own words. Sit back, grab a beverage of choice. Please keep all hands and arms inside the vehicle at all times. And folks, here we go. It took me several days to land on where to start with this subject, so by default, I'm going back to this organization's beginning. Quick reminder, they've been officially speaking for Jesus Christ of the Bible since 1919. Their words, not mine. And so a quick reference that could be a Jehovah's Witness bumper sticker. From the Pay Attention to Yourself and to All the Flock, the Secret Elders Handbook from 1991 on page 13, we are told this, quote, "Today, Jehovah provides instructions by means of the faithful steward." End quote. Okay, simple enough. And with that weekly reminder out of the way, what has Jehovah's Witnesses and their book, the Bible, had to say about racism? First, I'm not going to go over their sanitized third grade reading level article, the one I'm referring to that triggered all of this, currently featured on the website. Feel free to go read it yourself. I think it took me about 18 seconds and answers exactly nothing. But it's a nice place to point to when you're a Jehovah's Witness at a book cart and you get asked what the organization's stance is on racism. I could do it. I'm not going to. Go read it. About 18 seconds of your life. No, I'm going to go deeper on this subject, and it extends well beyond what is actually in print. As I mentioned, let's go back to the very beginning. And that always means we start with the two naked people in a garden that the governing body swears were real people. I'm going to try to keep this as brief as possible, but I encourage everyone to dig into it if you're interested. Even Jehovah's Witnesses go back to the first man and woman to explain the world's current diversity and the abundance of races here on the earth. The organization has this to say from the Watchtower of April 15th, 1976, page 255, questions from the readers, my kind of people. Looks like someone else had a few questions on the subject of racism back then. It tells us this, quote, "Did Adam have reddish skin, as his name has been said to suggest? No one on earth today can say with certainty what Adam's skin color was. We do know, however, that he was the progenitor of all humans, with all the variety of skin colors that now exist." End quote for a moment. I'm sorry, how do they know this? How? How do they know that everything we see on planet Earth today, all the beautiful variety of color and backgrounds, it started with Adam? Well, they don't share. It's not something you're unfamiliar with. They never really share. They just say they know it, kind of like they know the future. Remember? Okay, back to the quote. It says, quote, "A fundamental fact," there's that word fact again, "that we should not overlook is that all humans have descended from the first man, Adam. All persons, whether their skin is red, olive, brown, black, white, or yellow, are equally linked by descent with Adam. We are all his children. The genetic makeup that God gave to Adam was such that extensive variety could develop among his offspring." How they know genetic makeups? Don't ask. Back to the quote, "Variety in their hair color and texture, skin color, body size, facial characteristics, and so forth." It seems that as a result of geographic isolation and other factors, the particular traits became prominent among closely related peoples that in modern times have been termed the races of mankind. End quote. So in 1976, there it is. If you're thinking, well, I gotta be honest, a lot of supposition, a lot of facts that have no sources, that didn't tell me much, well, you're not alone. I feel the same way. We get them saying they know how Jehovah created genetics, and then the classic quote, it seems, end quote, that is common in all of the governing bodies' literature when it comes to stating facts. It seems, I'm not sure those two things go together. But without going into a diatribe on modern science, genetics, and hundreds of years of scholarly study by people way smarter than us and them, my first question is a simple one. Now, why would a Jehovah's Witness think that Adam and Eve were white people? That's my question. Why would a Jehovah's Witness think that Adam and Eve were white people? If you're like me and your first question regarding racism inside your childhood religion was this, then again, you're my kind of person. You see, I accepted from a very young age that Adam and Eve were clearly created as white people. And my young brain got that impression from them, the governing body, the leadership of Jehovah's Witnesses. And look, let's be honest, it seems I wasn't alone. Why do I say that? Well, see if you can answer based on their next comment from that same question from the readers, April 15th, Watchtower, page 255, which says this, quote, questions about Adam's skin color or particular facial or bodily characteristics cannot be settled at this time. Thus, artists' drawings of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden that appear in the publications of the Watchtower Society are simply efforts to convey the thought of the first two humans in paradise. Similarly, the last Adam, Jesus, might be depicted as a Jew, but no human today knows precisely what his appearance was. End quote. Okay. Uh-huh. When was the last time you, as a Jehovah's Witness or anyone reading their literature, saw Adam and Eve portrayed as olive-skinned people in the Middle East? How about dark-skinned? Anyone? Bueller? And as for their comment that they make Jesus look Jewish, my first thought is, what? I'm sorry. I was part of Jehovah's Witnesses for 40 years. I've looked at a lot of their literature all the way back to the late 60s, 70s, where Jesus didn't even have a beard. But let's be honest. When you look at Watchtower publications, Jesus doesn't look like a Jew. He looks a lot like an Alaskan lumberjack with a really nice facial hair. Or maybe, in some cases, a rugged Australian with a killer beard set to audition for Thunder Down Under in Las Vegas. I mean, that's the way they make him look. He's perfectly handsome. He doesn't look very Jewish, though. Pretty light-skinned. I mean, what? They never make Jesus look Jewish, and they never make the first man and woman look anything but, Western European, with a well-placed set of leaves, of course. We got to have the leaves in certain spots. But make no mistake, I grew up believing Adam was a white guy that looked a lot like my 6th grade math teacher. And why did I believe that? Because that is how Jehovah's Witnesses portray him. Everywhere. In everything. Every book, every magazine, every drama. Jesus is a white guy. So is Adam and Eve. White guy living in the Middle East. I mean, was I alone? Did anyone else believe Adam and Eve were white people? I mean, they could have at least made Eve look like a Kardashian or something, but no, nope. And I'm saying it right here, right now. This isn't an accident, folks. It's not an accident. It's likely what would appeal to those that, we were leaving magazines and books with in Western countries. They want their heroes to be, well, mostly white. It's very sensitive. Imagine the backlash those little old sisters would have gotten rolling up to a door in the deep South here in the U.S., passing Adam off as dark skinned. Oh, and by the way, he was perfect. He was perfectly dark skinned. That God created him that way. And then there is the obvious and inevitable bias of the artists that do all this stuff in New York. They too, evidently, were colored by their own bias. And you see it in the illustrations on the pages of Watchtower literature. If this is a new painful point to you personally, I want to say I'm sorry. I get it. But I'm going to be very transparent. I believe that this is not an accident. Pretty tough to place literature, books, and other stuff with a very overt racist, householder demographic. Simply my observations. And so it's not arguable to me. The leadership of Jehovah's Witnesses has leaned hard into the good guys of the Bible, and all of the good guys, well, yeah, they look really white, really white. And do I need to remind everyone that even the angels in heaven are apparently white males, even if they're invisible and they don't have junk between their legs? They're still white males. And before I drop my favorite guy, Noah, in this week, do a careful scan of illustrations of my guy, Noah. He's real white. But if you look closer, when you do, in some of their illustrations, you're going to find that at least one of his sons is dark-skinned. Interesting? Check it out if you've missed it. They're there. I'll very briefly share this here as well. If you're a Jehovah's Witness or former Jehovah's Witness, this may be something you have never heard before. Are you familiar with the serpent seed doctrine? Oh yeah. Sit down if this is new to you. I want to say here very plainly, it is not taught by Jehovah's Witnesses, but I could easily see the serpent seed doctrine at least influencing a few of their beliefs on race, as I'll soon show you here. In a nutshell, if you're not familiar with the serpent seed doctrine, it is a primary doctrinal resource for those who want to use the Bible to justify racial prejudice. The same book they're pointing at. The serpent seed doctrine teaches us that Eve, she did a little more than eat that piece of fruit from the talking snake. She got a little busy with the talking snake. I'm not kidding. Serpent seed doctrine, look it up. Yeah, calling Satan a snake was metaphorical. He was really just a really bad guy. He was a snake, a creep. But Eve gets busy with him there in the garden, and she ends up pregnant with Cain. And by extension, with would-be racists, she then gives birth to children of color. Cain's descendants are, according to the serpent seed doctrine, they're people of color, and they're really the sons and offspring of Satan. And this includes most any race or group that the serpent seed believer chooses to dislike. It's a thing, not taught by Jehovah's Witnesses. But can you see where it might have bled into some things? This entire teaching is rooted in superstitious beliefs and is particularly popular uh, with white supremacists and anti-Semites. In fact, the Unification Church also supports the serpent seed doctrine way back there in the Garden of Eden. Eve was kind of a slut. She liked Adam. She also liked Satan, and she did things with both of them. And yeah, it's deeply sick and disturbing due to the fact that it has racist implications. So deeply absurd. Apparently, Adam, he had competition for Eve's love, even though she was made out of his rib. The bad guy was father to everything but the white race. No, I'm not kidding. That's using the Bible and some other religion's superstitious teachings of which people believe. And I'm going to emphasize here again, for anyone who's uncomfortable, that Jehovah's Witnesses do not teach this. But look, it might be a reach. It's not like they haven't taught something similar. They've taught similar things, folks. Yeah, this is my opinion. But a studious Jehovah's Witness doesn't need to look far to find something equally insane as the serpent seed doctrine, or the fact that Adam and Eve are portrayed as white people. And wouldn't you know it, when you speak for Jehovah and Jesus and you're trying to prove that God loves everyone on the planet, including the estimated 85% of people of color that make up what is called the global majority, you can set the record straight by taking mankind back to the one man in the Bible that might just stand above the rest. You know it. It's my guy, Noah. And if you thought saving the animal kingdom, saving mankind, building a boat with one window, preaching to the known planet, and resisting Mrs. Noah's urges for 500 years made this guy a hero, well, wait until you hear this. Just 10 years after Jesus chose Jehovah's Witnesses to be his spokesperson in 1919, he wanted to get a few things off his chest, and he did it in the golden age of July 24th, 1929, on page 702. From the Faithful Slave, we get, quote, question, is there anything in the Bible that reveals the origin of the Negro? I end quote for a moment. Despise that word. Going to have to just read this as a quote. This stuff really makes me sick. Bear with me. Back to the quote. Answer. It is generally believed that the curse which Noah pronounced upon Canaan was the origin of the black race. End quote. Oh my God. Yeah. In print. Back to the quote. Certain it is that when Noah said, cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants shall he be unto his brethren, he pictured the future of the colored race. They have been and are a race of servants. There is no servant in the world as good as a good colored servant. And the joy that he gets from rendering faithful service is one of the purest joys there is in the world. End quote. Behold, the Holy Spirit in action on the faithful and discreet slave class of Jehovah's Witnesses of 1929. The Bible teaches us at Genesis 9:25 through 27 that after all Noah has done, including ensuring we had National Geographic, we had zoos, and And actually, you and I are here thanks to Noah, not to mention floating at sea for over a year, drowning in animal poop, and dealing with the guilt of not landing a single Bible study after years of field service back there. He can't even tie one on in the nude in the privacy of his own tent. It's in the Bible. And of course, Jehovah wanted to be sure we knew about that time his son Ham caught him in his birthday suit by including this story in the Bible. Ham then tells his brothers Shem and Japheth. Shem and Japheth do Dad a solid, and they put a blanket over his nudity. Noah gets sober. He curses Canaan, Ham's son. He curses his grandson to, according to the governing body of the time, be a servant of servants to his brothers. We have another name for that. It's called slavery. The curse of Ham has been used in the past to justify the enslavement of people of African descent. But surely, the only organization on earth representing Jesus, the faithful slave didn't buy into that, right? They didn't buy into that. Well, I just read it to you. As Jesus Christ watched on with a smile on his invisible face, he was blessing the teaching that black people were cursed and that they were destined to be slaves and that they were going to enjoy it. And if you want to overlook this in 2025, which I got to tell you, if you do, is downright troubling to me as a person, not my kind of person, how about the fact that someone asked this question and felt the need to get an answer in print in their magazine, telling you that Jehovah's Witnesses had systemic racism and were curious about this? If you're updating your scorecard at home, the faith known as Jehovah's Witnesses were racist from the very beginning of the organization. Maybe you want to ignore this as old light, but I don't know how. That is a special kind of ignorance. But maybe you think this is a one-off comment, that Jesus hoped everyone, maybe they just missed that in the golden age. Maybe they weren't paying attention. It's common, they don't read much. Well, I'm here to tell you that this isn't a one-off comment. In fact, this should really concern a modern-day Jehovah's Witness. Listen to what Jesus was watching when he decided the guys saying this stuff were the guys he wanted representing him on planet Earth. That's right. He was watching what they were saying, and he said, I really like these guys. I think they should be my guys. Are you ready? From the Watchtower of July 15th, 1902, The Negro, Not a Beast, pages 215 and 216. Quote, while it is true that the white race exhibits some qualities of superiority over any other, we are to remember that there are wide differences in the same Caucasian, Semitic, and Aryan family. And also, we should remember that some of the qualities which have given this branch of the human family its preeminence in the world are not such as can be pointed to as in all respects admirable. The secret of the greater intelligence and aptitude of the Caucasian, undoubtedly in great measure, is to be attributed to the commingling of blood amongst its various branches, and this was evidently forced in large measure by circumstances under divine control. End quote. Yes, the faithful slave of 1902, just 17 years before being Jesus' choice to represent him, was saying that God, Jehovah, made white people the superior race on earth. He arranged for it. It was forced onto man from heaven, and as they call it, it was divine. Nothing racist to see here, right? Even if it does sound a lot like the typical thoughts, comments, and actions of a certain guy named Adolf Hitler in Nazi Germany. From the Bible versus Evolution, page 30, we're told this, quote, God has specially blessed and favored certain branches of the Aryan race in Europe and America. But the fact that the white race has been more abundantly blessed with the light of the gospel than others is not to be understood to signify that when members of other races heard and appreciated the gospel, they were repulsed or rejected by the Lord. While the elect church will probably be composed chiefly of the highly favored white race, nevertheless, it will probably have in it representatives out of every kindred, people, and tongue. End quote. In print. Quote, probably we may include people of color. If you think this is dead and old light, come on, man, you're digging into the past. You might want to take a look at who makes up the current governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses in 2025. Notice anything? Lots of diversity, right? Lots. And they've been doing this stuff from the beginning of this organization. The subtle, not so subtle nuance in thought that the white race is the highly favored race. And yeah, these other folks aren't, Jesus isn't repulsed by them. Thanks for clarifying. But, we'll include them. But, the white people, from the beginning, take a look at the governing body in 2025. And I couldn't help but think, what did Jesus say again about a house built on sand? You remember the foundation? The beginning of this organization? You can dismiss this if you want, but you're only fooling yourself. But just one more of many examples, in case you weren't convinced to go look at this for yourself, all in print. From the Watchtower of February 15th, 1904, pages 52 and 53, we're told this. Deep breath, Stacy. Quote, can the Ethiopian change his skin? What the Ethiopian cannot do for himself, God could readily do for him. The difference between the races of men and the differences between their languages have long been arguments against the solidarity of the human family. The doctrine of restitution has also raised the question, how could all men be brought to perfection, and which color of skin was the original? The answer is now provided. God can change the Ethiopian skin in his own due time. Professor H.A. Edwards of schools in Slater, Missouri, has written for the public press an elaborate description of how Julius Jackson of New Frankfort, Missouri, a Negro boy of 9 years, began to grow white in September 1901 and is now fully 9/10 white. He assures us that this is no whitish skin disease, but that the new white skin is as healthy as that of any white boy, and that the changed boy has never been sick and never has taken medicines. End quote. Sick. Sick stuff. Sick. But Jehovah's Witnesses are told this is what got them chosen to be one of one. It was stuff like this that got Jesus' attention and made him choose them as the only true religion. Don't worry about people of color. Jehovah can turn them back into white people. This is stunning. This is racism. As the light got brighter through the years, Jesus kept watching, and then he released the 1946 yearbook, which broke down the attendance at the annual meeting. You know what a big deal that is. It included a breakdown of the number of partakers. It included the breakdown of how many pioneers. And, oh my God, look at that in print. It features a count of how many Negroes were in the audience. It's its own line item. If you need to see it, go look at something like a JW Facts or look at the stuff on the social media of this podcast. Proving that those future heavenly dwellers were already experiencing segregation as late as 1946 from Jesus and his chosen guys on earth. Sick, sick stuff, folks. And you can see why I hate this subject. I'm not trying to be overly dramatic. I grew up in a melting pot in the Bay Area, California. All of my friends were different from me, and it was the most wonderful childhood ever. I'm only sharing a few examples of this stuff, all available in print in their literature. Why were Jehovah's chosen people, including those he wanted with him in heaven to judge the rest of us, teaching systemic racism? How does that happen if Jesus is running this organization? I think I stumbled on a concrete reason. You see, people tend to emulate their leaders, those they revere, those they respect. So when we go back to what Jesus saw when he chose Jehovah's Witnesses, look no further than the man he evidently placed in a role much like my favorite guy Noah, or maybe Moses, or the prophets, or even the apostles. Jesus chose a guy named Judge Joseph Rutherford. Would you consider it reasonable to conclude that Judge Joe, now residing in heaven and hopefully listening in today, was also familiar with Jesus' words found here? From John 3:15 of the New World Translation, quote, I set the pattern for you, that just as I did to you, you should do also, end quote. So I'm sure that Jesus' favorite guy, Judge Joseph Rutherford, was following Jesus' pattern, right? That's why Jesus chose him. That's why Jehovah's Witnesses exist today. That's why the 2025 governing body go out of their way to prop Judge Joe up as an example in all their publications and all their videos and their dramas and stuff, right? So, knowing that Judge Joe was following Jesus' pattern closely, it got him chosen. What did he have to say about the evils of racism when he was leading this organization? Well, I gotta tell you, I'm glad you asked. During this same time period of railing against black people, Judge Joe made it a point to fuel the fires, this is awkward, of anti-Semitism. Jesus must have been so proud of him, considering Jesus, well, he could have came to earth and been anybody, but he decided to be a Jew. He was Jewish. during his one and only visit, where he only preached to Jewish people. Oh, and let's not forget, he also appointed all Jewish people to his first governing body, as Jehovah's Witnesses believe. He filled it with 12 Jewish guys, his apostles. But that didn't stop Judge Joe in the 20th century. He was fueling things like this. The Golden Age of 1927, February 23rd, page 343 tells us, quote, "Be it known once and for all that those profiteering, conscienceless, selfish men who call themselves Jews and who control the greater portion of the finances of the world and the business of the world will never be the rulers in this new earth. God would not risk such selfish men with such an important position." End quote. Safe to say, probably no Jewish guys were hanging around with Judge Joe. Yeah, Jesus may have picked Jewish males for his first governing body in the first century, but somewhere along the way, he decided that Jewish people would never get important positions again in the future. Much too risky. But as history will show you in detail, Judge Joe didn't stop there. He then went after the Catholic Church, who complained to some guy named Adolf Hitler, who then took away all Jehovah's Witness operations in Germany. What would Judge do about that? What would Joe have to say? Well, when Hitler took away all of Joe's printing presses and, ability to collect donations, Judge Joe Rutherford, well, he leaned into something near and dear to his heart. He leaned into racism in print. The man handpicked to replace Chuck Russell sent a letter to Adolf Hitler in which he praises Hitler for what he was doing to the Jews. Suddenly, in my mind, my guy Noah getting hammered and naked looks like a really small judicial matter, in my opinion. In Judge Joe's document titled "A Letter to Hitler," I still can't believe it as I say it out loud. He said things like this, quote, "The Brooklyn headquarters of the Watchtower Society is pro-German in an exemplary way and has been so for many years. The conference of 5,000 delegates also noted, as is expressed in the declaration, that the Bible researchers of Germany are fighting for the very same high ethical goals and ideals which also the national government of the German Reich proclaimed, respecting the relationship of humans to God." End quote. Oh no. Yeah, it's in print. He was endorsing the German Reich and saying that Jehovah's Witnesses supported their, quote, ethical goals and ideals. Rutherford and then Nathan Knorr, who would be the guy that replaced him, they organized a district convention in Berlin on June 25th, 1933, to release a document called the Declaration of Facts. Go look at it. It's a 4-page pamphlet that featured the following comments, quote, "It has been the commercial Jews of the British American Empire that have built up and carried on big business as a means of exploiting and oppressing the peoples of many nations. It has been the commercial Jews of the British American Empire that have built up and carried on big business as a means of exploiting and oppressing the peoples of many nations." End quote. The Jews, according to Judge Joe. He was doing this so he could get his printing facilities back up and running in Germany. during the Nazi regime. He was doing this, in other words, let's just call it what it is, for money. He endorsed how Hitler was treating Jewish people. He agreed with them. He didn't think much of them. Let that sink in. If you're a witness doubting this or hearing this for the first time, you can see all of this racism in all of its glory in the yearbook of 1934, pages 132 to 139. This was all alive and well with the guy that founded the very name Jehovah's Witnesses. To put a bow on it, it has been reported that while giving a talk on biblical prophecies respecting the return of the Jews to Palestine, the Promised Land, at a Canadian Bible student convention in Winnipeg, Manitoba in the early 1920s, Judge Joe was reported as saying this, quote, "I'm speaking of the Palestine Jew, not the hooked-nosed, stoop-shouldered little individual who stands on the street corner trying to gyp you out of every nickel you've got." End quote. Well now, am I the only one wondering how things are going up there in heaven? How are things going? Who broke the awkward silence when Judge Joe was resurrected to his invisible life and Jesus reminded Joe, hey, that stuff you said about Jews, I don't know if you remember this, I was a Jew, and look over there, there's Peter, there's John, there's James, Andrew. They were my apostles, they were all Jews. How did that conversation go? And also, there are a few genderless, invisible 144,000 people in the room that, well, they started out as Jews. I'm sure it was the Apostle Peter that broke the silence, right? I mean, Peter probably stepped and went, hey, Judge Joe, I got a bone to pick with you. Like, huh? I mean, Peter was known to put his foot in his mouth a few times, and he was the guy, incidentally, that opened the door for Christianity to all those other non-Jewish people. But I can hear Judge Joe now. Hey, come on, Peter. Jesus, come on, cut me some slack. I see Chuck Russell's here. Hi, Chuck. Good to see you. And he had us measuring pyramids and selling Miracle Wheat. Can we just forget that part where I supported concentration camps and gas chambers and the attempted extermination of Jewish people? Can you forget that I wanted to be friends with Hitler? Yeah. You can just dismiss this stuff if you want, if you're a witness. I get it because it's uncomfortable. But this is real. And this is what they believe. Those guys are all in heaven now. The conversations must be glorious. But look, Judge Joseph Rutherford then dropped the mother of all bombs when he announced in 1935 that Jesus completely forgot to tell mankind in the Bible about a future paradise earth. It slipped his mind. He was busy. From that point forward, most of the messaging of Jehovah's Witnesses as they knocked on your door on Saturday mornings was to tell you about a paradise earth filled with diversity, with color, with so many different people, walks of life. Oh, and by the way, awkwardly, also a few of those Jewish or Middle Eastern people Judge Joe apparently hated. You know, not deniable here, folks. You know who I'm talking about. The resurrected people of old. People like my guy Noah. People like Abraham. How about King David? The prophets? I guess Judge Joe did not think this through very well, did he? Didn't think it through real well when he was bashing the Jews. But when that message keeps your organization going, it keeps your organization adding members all over the world and growing, including more factories and more kingdom halls, you need to make sure nothing gets in the way of your profits. I'm sorry, in the way of saving lives. But what could hinder such a wonderful fantasy? Sorry again, message about the paradise. Yeah. Well, nothing has ever been off limits for the leadership of Jehovah's Witnesses. Did you know that that goes right down to intimate things? Yeah, that includes intimacy and who you choose to love, marry, and make babies with. That too, on matters of race, becomes their business. If anyone you choose might hinder their business. Are you ready? The guys leading this organization decided to discourage interracial marriages. Not racist at all, right? From the Awake of April 22nd, 1953, page 11, quote, "When all traits are considered, it is safer to marry a person near one's own age, of one's own race, and of similar interests, ideals, and beliefs." End quote. Inspired counsel on diversity. Not mentioned in this list of things to consider when marrying someone is that little thing called love. We don't need that, even though God is love and we... Who needs that? But not to be missed is marrying someone of your own race. That was the counsel. I should be focused on where this person was born on the planet Earth, what color their skin is. Yeah, in print, according to the faithful and discreet slave of Jehovah's Witnesses. And again, nothing says discreet like telling someone who to marry and disqualifying someone that might come from a different branch of the human tree. But just 7 years later, someone apparently was questioning this wise counsel. From the Watchtower of July 15th, 1960, pages 447 and 448, questions from the readers, my kind of people, we get, quote, the question, "Is it wrong for a white person and a colored one to marry if they truly love each other?" End quote. Imagine this being a question that you need some strange bunch of guys you don't know in New York to answer for you. I'm white, she's black. He's black, she's Hispanic. I better check off with the guys in New York. And back then in the 60s, no one knew who they were. The governing body wasn't even a thing until 1971. So could I get your blessing on who I'm in love with? What was the answer from the 60 July 15th Watchtower? Quote, "God's word does not forbid marriage between the races." Okay, we're off to a strong start. On the contrary, it shows that all races are related and that they all come from one man originally. Okay, fell off a bit. Quote, "No one race is esteemed better in God's sight than another." And note this, quote, "It is quite likely that those who marry across racial lines will have more of this tribulation than will others." End quote. Racial lines? What is that? What's a racial line? What? Anyone that knows Jehovah's Witnesses and the governing body knows that that last little sentence in the question from the readers is exactly how they plant a thought. Anyone who does marry someone from a different walk of life, they're going to have a tough time in life. They're going to have, quote, tribulation, a word they use a lot that engenders fear. You might think of some other examples. Well, the Bible doesn't comment on going to college, but is it wise to go to college among all those worldly people where the demons are sitting? This is how they do it. On matters of race and love. It's all right there. Well, yeah, no race is superior, but look, if you don't choose someone like you, you're going to be persecuted. Fear. You might be in love, but they're going to drop some subtle racist overtones into the answer, and more importantly, that fear. But is that really the governing body's only concern? Was it then? Is it now? See if you can spot it. The article from the 1960 Watchtower question from the readers continues. It says, quote, "In many parts of the earth, there is still such racial discrimination. And entering such a marriage may result in restricting the Christian's opportunities for preaching the good news of God's kingdom. End quote. I want to laugh, but I can't. That's right. You may long to be with him or her forever. But look, you're white. She's brown. And well, is that going to keep people from approaching you to pick up our books and magazines at the book cart on Saturday? Don't we want to cater to other racists by not marrying someone we love, but instead considering whether we can get another financially donating convert? Isn't that more important? It's right there. This is who these men are and have always been, as I've shown, since even before Jesus chose them. Overt racism, concerned about their business and how it will be impacted if you come up with a brown person or someone of a beautiful country that isn't your own. But just to land the point, the article concludes with a question, quote, I still cannot believe this. I got to breathe. I can't believe this hasn't been scrubbed. That question from the readers, the 1960 Watchtower, ends with one sentence. I can't believe this. Quote, is it truly love or chiefly physical attraction? End quote. Wait, what? What? How none of us spotted this subliminal suggestions and this stuff that they do to create doubts it's insane and so damaging. But come on now. Maybe you just think they're hot. Get it together, brother or sister. This isn't love. And again, we need you to get those magazines out. Don't ruin our vibe at the book cart. Come on now. This is unbelievable. And I am just going to confess, as I do on this show weekly, as someone whose celebrity crush is Jessica Lucas and the single me would jump at a chance to date her, well, these guys are killing my vibe. They're killing me. All of these racist overtones in print. Come on, maybe you just think they're hot. Why don't you try to work through that? Is it really important? But 13 years later, questions on race remained in this organization. I can't imagine why. Penelope Cruz just walked into the Kingdom Hall, but you're a white guy, and you need to think this through. Think it through, brother. Just 13 years later, the December 1st, 1973 Watchtower, pages 735, 736. Do you see a trend? Questions from the readers, my kind of people, asked this, quote, what is the view of Jehovah's Witnesses towards interracial marriage? End quote. I do not have the time to read the entire answer, but they were asking the question again, and they printed it again. They say here in a nutshell, there's nothing wrong with it according to the Bible, blah, blah, blah. But then they do it again and drop this at the end of the article. Quote, the Christian is under obligation to proclaim the good news of the kingdom to others. As a factor, then, he may consider whether or not interracial marriage is likely to create a seriously adverse effect on the attitude of the people in his community towards the couple, no, quote, toward this kingdom announcement work. The examples of Christ Jesus and his apostles show that they were willing to forego things to which they had a right, rather than severely hinder persons from being receptive to the truth of God's word. End quote. The governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses. The modern version at the time of this question from the readers was 2 years old. It was 1973. And they're still low-key encouraging pandering to racists. Why? The couple's personal happiness, love, or safety? No, because you need to spread their message, and we don't want anything getting in the way of our own success. I mean, look, this is awkward, but even Jesus and the apostles had to make some personal sacrifices, including that time Jesus put Mary Magdalene in the friend zone because she was Jewish. I mean, Judge Joe didn't like him, certainly Jewish. Judge Joe wouldn't date a Jewish girl. We're going to friend zone Mary Magdalene. And the apostles, you remember, they gave up fishing so that they could preach. And that's just like turning down a life of love with a beautiful man or woman that just wasn't born in your country, right? It's absurd. And I'm going to say it again. It's racism. When you're telling someone to pacify non-believing racist people just so that they might become a Jehovah's Witness, you've got some major ass issues. You are sick. But hey, it's right there on the Watchtower Library in 2025. A modern-day treasure chest of wisdom that if you've seen past episodes, I am convinced they're about to scrub any day now. Nothing says you're a loving organization like suggesting not falling in love and marrying someone because they look different from you. They come from a different part of the earth. And I got to tell you, folks, especially Jehovah's Witnesses, it kind of makes this whole paradise earth thing filled with diversity, the whole thing's a little suspect. It's a little suspect when you consider the overt racism this organization has taught. God, I hate this subject. It's right up there for me personally with the blood doctrine. It's so stupid. It's so hateful. It's hard to talk about it. I'll move on. But there is so much more. And as I do, I'm going to move on at this point, and I'm going to move into a few more of that favorite segment, Random Thoughts, on this very subject of racism. And some of these random thoughts may only be of interest to me. Welcome to my very disturbing dark brain. How about this? Speaking of the Bible, who remembers that time Moses married a Cushite woman in Numbers chapter 12? While the whole account's a little fuzzy, it's generally accepted that Moses married a black or dark-skinned woman from a region south of Egypt or in northern Africa, where people were known even then to be dark-skinned. That Adam guy got procreating. That happened fast, didn't he? Anyway, his brother and sister in the account, Aaron and Miriam, call him out for it. They're mad about it. And while it may or may not be racist, they were leveraging her not being one of us to trash talk their brother Moses, Jehovah's favorite guy. How does Jehovah react? I find this very interesting. Well, as is the case a lot in the Bible, he punishes the woman. Yeah, it's the woman's fault. It's all her fault. Aaron, the other guy trash talking, well, he just gets a pass in the account. But Jehovah does something interesting in punishing Miriam. Verse 10 says, quote, "The cloud moved away from the tent, and look, Miriam was struck with leprosy as white as snow. Then Aaron turned toward Miriam, and he saw that she was struck with leprosy," end quote. Interesting. No? Interesting? I noted the emphasis on the whiteness of her now diseased skin. A contrast may be intended here, at least in my brain, with the Cushite wife's dark skin. Although it's not made explicit, I want to underline that. I find it interesting. Why has this always interested me? Well, folks, it looks like the governing body missed how Jehovah felt, this is awkward, about interracial marriages. You could argue it's because Moses was his guy, but interesting, he hit Miriam with white as snow leprosy. A stark contrast from the beautiful black skin of Moses' wife. Jehovah ain't got no time for racism, and it's in the first few chapters of the Bible. How about another random thought from my dark brain? I'm coming back to this because I think it indicates a subtle undertone of racism that exists in Jehovah's Witnesses in 2025. Can someone explain to me why are all faithful people portrayed as white in the Watchtower publications? Why? If you look back at old Watchtower illustrations, including those featuring Adam and Eve, wow, they were really white. I guess it doesn't matter if they were living in the Middle East. Remember the old green Bible in the back? It showed where we think the Garden of Eden might have been on the map. Who remembers that? It's in the Middle East, but they were really white. It doesn't matter if it was Adam or my guy Noah or Moses or King David. They're always pictured as Caucasian guys you might see waiting in line at your local Starbucks. They either had the best sunscreen back in those days or they were white people. Does anyone know? Incidentally, I also find it remarkable that these men of faith, side point, had no body hair. Well, why was that? The only one. Really added to my insecurity during puberty, let me tell you. Evidently, manscaping was a thing in the ancient world. I want to make several jokes here about dull razors in the desert sun or lack of shaving cream or how my guy Noah had time to look like such a gentleman while also rounding up rhinos, but we'll skip it all this week. He had 2 rhinos. He was a white guy. He also, in the illustrations in the Watchtower, had the smoothest arms and chest you'll ever see. But needless to say, I'm guessing there aren't many diverse artists in New York, huh? Just a guess. But everyone's white in their publications. And then finally, another random thought. In in Acts chapter 8, we learn about a nameless guy, but get to learn that he has no testicles. Included that one. For fun, look how they claim that evidently can't be true. You see, the guy was apparently Ethiopian. And last I checked, this organization said in print that dark-skinned people weren't as good as white people and destined to a life of servitude. I want to underline, I'm quoting them, not myself. But I guess they missed all the details in that story in Acts chapter 8 of the Ethiopian eunuch. He was dark-skinned. He didn't have nuts, but that's the important part. There's a whole explanation behind that. Go look that up. But they seem to have missed that even in the Bible, people with darker skin were worshiping Jehovah. Wild. I share all of this because the only website powered by Holy Spirit as of today is currently featuring an article on racism. And as soon as I saw it, I thought, oh my God, the irony. It's impossible to come to a definitive number of ethnicities on this planet, but estimates range from 11,000 to 17,000 plus different ethnicities. That is a lot of variety, a lot of beauty, a lot of amazing diversity that we all get to enjoy every day. I deeply value it. But the article on the website for Witnesses in 2025, it states this, quote, Acts 10, 34 and 35 states, God is not partial, but in every nation, the man who fears him and does what is right is acceptable to him. End quote. We all recognize the verse. It continues with the comment, for this reason, nobody can rightly consider one race to be superior to another. End quote. It sounds like the current governing body at some point received new light. and have adjusted their stance since Jesus chose them. And how odd. The governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses as of May 2025, it's currently made up of 10 white men and one very elderly black man. I'm sure the majority of this planet and those 17,000 other ethnicities, they feel very represented, right? Jesus, in my mind, looking at the governing body and at their illustrations and at their history, Jesus has a type. Jesus has a type. But even in 2025, Adam is still a white guy. Judge Joseph Rutherford is still a hero, now residing in heaven, and they point to him, and they point to the stuff he wrote. And the Watchtower Library still features disgusting comments on interracial marriage because it might keep a racist from becoming a Jehovah's Witness. And so on the subject of racism, this is where I land. The more things change, the more they stay the same. I want to thank you for being here this week. Wherever you may be, enjoy it all and be well.